Welcome to the Stoned Heen View, a podcast series which interviews a range of sport club representatives and leading professional sport club personnel during the COVID-19 shutdown period. We find out what these people are doing during the current health crisis with some of our most popular sports seasons postponed. I'm Mark Heenan, and today I'm going to speak to a special guest. However, I've actually got a new banner, and as you can see here, it's called the Stoned Heen View podcast, and a bit of mucking around tonight because we've got this set up and like I said, it's got a new face, got a new logo, and the Stoned Heen View has had a bit of a makeover. Jared Whitcomb from Whitself Media has helped me put that together, so thanks to Jared. And we have got a special guest on tonight. Her name is Jacquie Johnston, and she is the Ocean Grove Cricket Club senior women's captain. Incidentally, the victorious senior women's captain that led her team to a premiership, their first club women's senior cricket women's premiership, I should say. And we welcome Jacquie Johnston to this podcast after all a bit of mucking around just to get you here. And thank you, Jacquie, for being so patient, and I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. Well, how has everything transpired, obviously, since COVID? And, you know, we wanted to speak to you because your team had some amazing success this season and also last year as well. But how does it feel sort of a couple of weeks on from that success on February 28 at Geelong Cricket Ground? You took on East Belmont, Deb, and you won.
Well, I have to say that my initial response with the win was an ultimate relief, because you spend so much time planning for it. You spend so much time training for it. You're mentally thinking about how many different possibilities and eventualities that are going to take place in a game, you know, tactics, strategies, all those things. And then there's that personal aspect that you certainly want to do well in a grand final. So there were all those factors coming in together, and it worked on the day. So there was, for me, a great sense of relief. After that, then we've had the euphoria of appreciating the win with my teammates and with the club. And I've still got a buzz 2 weeks later, and I'm sure I still have a smile on my face talking about it with different people that I cross paths with, including my patients and things like that, over the next few months.
In terms of the success, and we'll talk about some of the challenges that the club and the women's team has faced during COVID just shortly, but I think a lot of people forget that you've had a strong team and you've got some really talented and experienced players, but you know, this has been 12 months in the making. I mean, I think a lot of people forget that the previous season, maybe not you, not the players in your team, they won't forget this, is they've got the motivation and the driving force to succeed. The fact is that last season you went pretty much undefeated and then you lost in the grand final to, you know, the Illawarra team, and you ended up losing that final. How much motivation was there from the previous season?
We had a great season last year. It was the first season of a Barwon women's cricket competition, which was very exciting. We had no idea what we were getting into and what the standard was going to be. We basically gathered as a cluster of people, some of who'd played cricket before, but many who hadn't, and we sort of developed our team. And then we went along the season and things sort of worked for us, and we kept on winning a few games and go, how good is this? And we got to the playoff for the South Division and we won that, and how good's this? And then we get into a very tough game in the grand final, and we only lost with 4 balls to spare in the 20th over. It was incredibly tight, and there are all those little half chances where the ball goes through a fielder, or there's an LBW decision, or a run out, and there's some interesting circumstances which finals always bring up. So it was a real kick in the guts to sort of lose that game, and it hurt us a lot, which has certainly driven us as a club and as a team moving forward this year. Look, our team from this year is different from last year. It's been wonderful that we've been able to get new players. Last year we were playing a 9-a-side comp. Now this year we played an 11-a-side comp, and we had 15 players, and those 15 players trained every week, most people twice a week throughout the whole season. It wasn't, in some ways there was a lot more motivation than with a lot of routine clubs, and maybe because of the COVID lockdown and that enthusiasm, it was just wonderful to be part of. And we're still enjoying each other's company, and, you know, caught up for lunch on the weekend. Yeah, and then headed back to play table tennis for the afternoon, which I can tell you what was a pretty serious competitive event. Our next event possibly will be a tennis tournament, because a lot of us come from a tennis background, but I think it will be pretty serious, and it'll be an interesting one to be a fly on the wall with.
I actually found it interesting looking at the scorecard between East Belmont, Deb, and Ocean Grove. Yeah. There's another Jacquie Johnston in the other team.
And I have to say, when she was batting, I was fielding in front, sort of on the side of the wicket where I was facing the scoreboard. And it actually really threw me because I'm watching Jacquie Johnston getting scores and I go, but hang on, that's not me. And it was a little bit off-putting to keep on watching what was this Jacquie Johnston was doing. And it's like, but hang on, I'm not doing anything. I have to say, though, when we played them earlier on in the season, there was one comment in the sideline on the banter on the field, there's only space for one Jacquie Johnston here. So that was coming from another team. I'd like to say after the grand final, which Jacquie Johnston belonged on the field.
Well, just confirming out there, Jacquie, that is Jessica Johnston, not
yes.
Jacquie.
No relation.
Johnston. No relate. Well, geez, it's a pretty common name. But
exactly.
Yeah. So obviously, with regards to the challenges you faced, I mean, I don't know what was the communication sort of between the end of last season, so when you had your little wake after the loss to Illawarra in the final that you played at Belmont Common, and then the next 6 months. I mean, obviously, not long after you had COVID. Did you have things like having a WhatsApp group where the girls emailing or texting, or was there like some sort of Facebook group? And then when training started, what were some of the hurdles that you had to face as a training group around COVID?
Well, I think throughout that, after the end of the last season, we'll meet up on a Sunday in July, and we'll just once a month, we'll just catch up and have a net. And then COVID really restricted that. And we have an instant messenger group, so we do, send banter and, throughout the time. So we're engaged. But then, there was the nothing. And I think that the real thing was the uncertainty as to, was a season going to take place? When was a season going to be able to take place? And what was it going to entail? And I think that, the committee that was running the cricket comp had to do a lot of deep thinking and looking at the protocols and what Cricket Victoria was allowing and those things. So there wasn't really, firstly, you couldn't really promote and say, hey, come and play cricket and try to recruit and encourage people to come down and become part of our club, because we didn't know if we had a product and games to be able to actually come and train and play with. And there's no point saying coming to training when you can't train. And there's no point coming to try and play when you can't play. So it came in later. And so finally we got to catch up with our coach, and he said, look, I'd love to catch up for over lunch, and we'll have a bit of a chat about the new season. And that gave us an opportunity to actually debrief a little bit with him and award him his coach's award that we'd allocated from last year, because we'd actually missed our club presentation afternoon, which had come in with the lockdown. So there was a sense that we hadn't actually finished last season. So having our lunch at the start of the year, saying, hey, watch this space, this is what's going on, this is what we're thinking for the year, was good, and it gave us an opportunity to close last season. Once we had approval, we were able to start training. But again, there's so much uncertainty with COVID that you couldn't really go out and broadcast, hey, we're looking for new players, we're doing all these things, let's have a come and try day, because there's such uncertainty there. But we were very fortunate that we were able to get a number of people come down and join us to play. Some of it was word of mouth. Others, which was a really good sign of Ocean Grove as a cricket club, was we had people who were looking to play cricket and also looking to get their kids into the T20 Blast and to play, the junior development programs. And they could sort of see that, the junior programs were working on a Friday night at the main ground at Ocean Grove, which also coincided with our training. So I go, hey, this is great. And then we had a couple of people coming and looking at getting their kids into those programs and go, oh, gee, I want to have a go at this. And a couple of mates came along. So we were actually able to get the kids occupied, having a great time, and be able to train ourselves. Probably one of the big things that sort of COVID led to. Now, firstly, we don't have a big core of people. We've got 15. And with the initial training, it was trainings in groups of 10 and how many in a net and separating nets. When we've got 3 nets and maybe 10 people, there wasn't really that same issue there. I do know that some of the bigger clubs had a lot more issues in terms of being able to run training drills, having to have people on one side of the ground, another group on the other side of the ground, and doing those things. But we're pretty small, so that was okay. Shared equipment is a big factor in women's sport. So unlike boys and juniors and going into the men's sport, women often turn up and they go, hey, I want to play cricket, but they haven't played before. And women, they can't just go and borrow their partner's gear, because often it's a little bit too big. And so you turn up and do you have any gloves? No. Do you have a pat? No. Do you have a bat? No. So we usually have a big bag of shared equipment. And COVID meant that you sort of had to wipe down and spray all equipment and leave it to air before it could be
Mm.
used again. Helmets. Again, very few people had their own helmets. And so suddenly it's like, oh, you're not allowed to wear a mask. You've got to wear a mask everywhere you're going outside of training. But here, go and share this helmet and we'll just spray it down and it'll be able to be used. There was certainly a big prompt, and I think that the Grandies and a number of the other cricket retailers in Geelong sold out a women's size cricket equipment over the course of the season because there was such a flood of people going to get equipment for their own personal bags, which it's a big outlay for people to play the sport, but it's just wonderful that people actually took that step.
Absolutely. And I was just going to mention that, I saw this sort of evolution of female cricket in Ocean Grove. I was lucky enough to come down once for training and say, hey, girls, we're going to do a photo. And none of the girls wanted to do a photo. And then I'm a batsman and looking at the other end, there's no one bowling. And I'm like, gee, so I have to put the camera away. And I saw a couple of people around. I thought, geez, where am I going to put the camera? Because these girls need a bowling person straight away. And had a bit of not knee arthritis, but had some pain in my knee for some reason. I think it might have been a shin splint or whatever, but I thought I'll come off a short run and, try and fire in some quick runs. But I guess the thing is, I saw that evolution and the start of that from last year. And what really engrossed me about your side and how well you performed is that you're always encouraging. And the fact is that particularly with women's sport at a local level, particularly football and cricket, the girls can be all ages. And someone like yourself that's captain, you really embraced that. You really said, right, whatever the case is, just have a go and enjoy it and have fun, get to meet new friends. We can have a coffee, catch up. And it was almost like, not another mother's club or anything like that, but it was almost like, hey, this is a social outlet rather than just being an outlet to get fitness.
Look, it's the whole package. It's not just about turning up and playing, cricket. You've got to actually enjoy each other's company and you've got to make it fun. And if it's not fun for people, they're not going to come back. People go, oh, I might have a look at this. I might have a feel. I'm not too sure about that group, that it didn't feel welcoming. And so we had to try and create a very welcoming environment. And we've got people from so many different diverse walks of life. And we've got people with such a variation in their sporting abilities. Some people who've played cricket previously, some people who've always wanted to play. There's certainly been some legends in the backyard, but who've never actually had the opportunity to move it beyond that. And so there's a big variety. And so our big key is to sort of try to educate along. So not just throw people in the deep end and not know what they're doing, but to try and teach and develop, which means that, we want to encourage everyone to have a bat. And through the season, both last year and this year, we certainly rejigged the batting lineup a number of different times to try and get people time in the middle. And, just to try, if you're looking and go, I got a feeling this team's not going to be as strong as we thought, then we change the lineup. So there's a lot of times that I'd pad myself up to come in at number 3 and after a couple of overs go, no, this is not going to be that sort of day, and then try to get other people in to have some time in the middle to be able to develop their skills. And one of the girls hit a 4 against North Geelong and raised a bat as if she scored 100. It was a wonderful buzz. And first runs of people, you celebrate those because it's an individual achievement. So we celebrated everyone's achievements, not just who's got the big scores, who's got the big averages, stuff like that. Someone goes and bowls 4 balls on the pitch. It's like, woohoo! It's a bit of a difference. So we've just got to get everyone along on the journey and make it fun. I know that when we got washed out from net training one night, we sort of ended up doing some fielding drills, and it was it was almost getting to footy tackles, the competitiveness, but just because everyone was sort of just so raring to go and so interested in training. It's it was getting quite willing.
Yeah, I want to talk about 2 people in particular. And look, I know you don't want to single out players as such. One of them's a player and one of them's off field. But can you just talk about the 2-year evolution and how important these 2 people were? And I know that you might have had something to do with one of your players prior to your first season at Ocean Grove or the inaugural team, and was lucky enough to cover all of that when you played your first match against Leopold at Leopold and get the photos. But Alana Cott and James Nestles. How much have they had an impact on your team? I mean, I know Alana I don't know her, but from a playing perspective, that she's played up in Melbourne and had experience on turf, which was fantastic. And she's got that all-round ability, got that great physique. She's fit, particularly from a bowling perspective as well. And obviously she's a capable batter. But how important was that? And then also James off the field as well, like not ego-driven, a life member of the club. And I've got to meet him around the men's side as well. You know, one of the most loyal people that you'll meet at your club. How important were those two people?
Well, firstly, I'd like to touch on James. Walking in and taking on the role of a coach of women's cricket team, like women's sport is a bit of a poison chalice. There can often be a lot of personalities. Skills may not necessarily have been developed in the same way as with men's sport. It's like, we're looking at, if you're playing junior cricket, you start when you're 6 or 8, you play your juniors throughout, you're getting your coaching, you're getting different people, you're learning all this information all the way through. And then you might come up and play seniors when you're 16 and build in. And James has had a lot of experience with junior coaching within that club. And then walk up to a women's team, which is a variety of different personalities, a lot of people who've never played before, and they don't understand that language, the previous background, that expected knowledge that people would normally get if you were taking of a similar age of a men's team. It's a real credit for him to help to bring it together. And as we've developed our culture, he's sort of really been there as a facilitator. So he doesn't want to be telling us what to do. He wants to suggest. And so he's made it very much about the individuals within the team driving standards, individuals within the team running training. And, who's like Tanya Taylor's been running the nets and working out times and balancing. We've all been working together to take that. So it's been, a great achievement for him, and it's a big sacrifice to come to training twice a week and to games, and then to have to deal with all the phone calls and all the other protocols and everything else that needs to be done. He's also on the committee for the Barwon Women's Cricket Comp, so he's had a really strong role in terms of developing women's cricket, and I think it's just been really wonderful to sort of see that, and I hope that he's gained as much out of it as we have from having him there. With regards to Alana, now Alana was a really good junior cricketer. So she played in Essendon Maribyrnong Park, which is one of the established clubs up in Melbourne. And she was sort of, I think she was sort of streamlined and, as one of those potential players that was going to go places. But then when you hit university and there was the work trying to get part-time jobs and, the training commitments with sort of within the cricket club and with potentially with rep stuff, which she was sort of selected in, and it got a bit much. And so she sort of walked away from cricket for a number of years. She sort of filled in for a couple of games up in Bacchus Marsh, Melton, which is where she's from, with a friend. And that was it for basically 15 years. And then to sort of walk into our club, and it's really exciting that we had someone who actually played before and had that experience and knowledge. She primarily been a bowler when she was a junior, but because she had been playing on turf and done those things, she had some degrees of technique. And so we've she sort of stepped into the role as opening bat and has had a really good season. Bowling last year, because she bowls a really nice length and the outside off. And when we used to play in Melbourne, a lot of it was 2-day cricket. So you're looking at between 70 and 85 overs for an innings. And how you bowl is incredibly different from how you bowl in 2020. And to suddenly turn up in a 2020 situation where you've only got 9 on a team, anything that's outside off, there's no point, because you're not going to have a slip. You can't have a slip. You can't have a gully. You can't, you might be lucky if you got a third man. And so you don't really get reward for, good bowling as what we would define as good bowling in any other comp. And so it's been a gradual progression of working out how to turn her natural, beautiful bowling line and length into something which can, translate into a 2020 comp where you've got people playing crossbat, swinging shots, and they don't necessarily respect the traditional cricket technique because they've never grown up with it. Mm-hmm. And for example, we've played against a lot of soft ballers, and they see the ball and they'll pitch off if the ball's within their hitting zone, and which is quite a different style from traditional cricket. I think Alana's best game of the entire 2 seasons was the grand final. She made a wonderful 30-odd with the bat. She took a pivotal catch at square leg for Beck Fairy, and then she bowled just beautifully. So, it's great to see that building up of all those elements that she's had come together in such a good game.
I must admit, some of the skills that she had and the sort of the high leap, I mean, she could tell that she would be successful in other sports, and I'm sure she has. I would imagine even when she was younger, she would have been good at sports like athletics. So it's really, Jacquie, a little bit of a change of twist here is that, you've had some challenges during COVID, and you work in I suppose you work in the medical world, and you're a doctor, and you specialise particularly in sports medicine, and you've had some experiences along the journey working with not only your patients on the Bellarine, but also working with your other interests as well, which is football, but with PFL. I mean, how was it for you during COVID when you were dealing with sort of patients on a daily basis, when they probably couldn't come and see you because of the COVID pandemic? How did that change what you were doing with your consultation process?
I work in 3 different centres. So I work in general practice down at Point Lonsdale, and while we tried to move a lot of our consults onto telehealth, there was still that need to see patients face to face, because some things need to be attended to. If you've got a cut on your arm that's bleeding, you can't just sort of work that out over the phone. You've got to come in and stitch it up. You get chest pain, we've got to deal with that. And so within the general practice sphere, we sort of very much having to triage our patients and talk to them over the phone, work out what had to come in, what hadn't. So sometimes we actually talk to everyone on the phone and, to try and channel who could come in and what time to be seen. And even now, if we've got someone who's got a viral illness or symptoms that could potentially be COVID, we still need to channel those in and use our specific isolated rooms. It's not just about COVID, but it's about viruses in general. We're getting exposed to patients who are sick with viruses, which is part of our job. But if we get sick, then we've got to go and get COVID tested, and we've got to stay away at work until we have a negative COVID test. And even if it's just a cold, we've actually got to stay away from work until we're symptom free, because if we go to work, then we can get some of our colleagues sick, which means that they go around the cycle again. So there's been a really big focus on how to do that. We've had to do COVID tests throughout our line. We've had to try and prioritise a lot of people. So that's been a really challenging 12 months in terms of how medicine as we've done it has had to change. We've used a lot of electronic progressions, like the electronic scripts, to sort of help us with that. Now, the other facet is that I also work at Corio Bay Sports Medicine Centre and Bellarine Sports Medicine Centre in sports medicine. Now, when COVID, the big cloud, was coming in March, April last year, I had to stop consulting at both of those places because I was working in general practice. And if I were to get sick in general practice, and again, there was that real uncertainty of where COVID was. And early on, we weren't even allowed to get tested unless we had a fever or had a clear designation. So nowadays, how we test, and anyone's got viral sort of symptoms, cough, sore throat, runny nose, and get tested. Back in March, you could only get tested if you'd been an overseas traveller. You had a healthcare worker with a temperature over 38. And so there were really quick, strict requirements. So I unfortunately had to make the decision to stop working at my other 2 clinics in Geelong and Drysdale, because my primary factor was I'm a GP and I've got to look after the community, and sports medicine's a bit of a nice sideline. Certainly as things calmed down and we sort of got a bit more of a grasp of what was going on, a bit more of an understanding of where our cases were and what was going on within the community, I could sort of restart. So at Drysdale, it was funny that we'd sort of booked and say I was not available for a month, and we hadn't actually extended it, and then patients started being booked. So I go, oh, well, I better turn up. In Geelong, I did do some telemedicine. I did some consultations by video, and then sort of got back in the office. Having had everyone in lockdown, working from home and things like that, our nature of our injuries that we saw changed a lot over time. Mm-hmm. So whereas normally you'd see, a lot of football, a lot of netball, a lot of those sort of activity things, the footy season was cancelled, netball season was cancelled. So those team sport activities and injuries were stopped along the way. But we then developed a lot more other injuries because people were suddenly doing exercise and activities that they hadn't done before. So I can tell you that moccasin foot is a diagnosis. Chilblains can't come for a reason because everyone was walking around barefoot.
We didn't also have a proper flu season because of the fact that people were wearing masks and they were socially distant as well.
Yes. And so there's been a lot of different changes. It's interesting now, we're seeing a lot of, viral illness around in the community, and partly maybe because everyone's mixing a little bit more and crossing over with school and kids and things like that. And maybe we're just letting our guards down a little bit. But it's interesting. I'm hopeful that we won't have much of a flu season this year because there's very little flu circulating in the community, and it's not coming from overseas because anyone that comes from overseas has to quarantine. So there are some benefits for us. But it's certainly been a very different year here in terms of the nature of our medicine. With my stuff in my sports medicine, I'm certainly using the telemedicine a lot. So I get patients who come from Warrnambool, Colac, all kinds of places to come and consult with me in Geelong. And so I can see them, assess them in Geelong. And then if I'm ordering scans and things like that, I can talk to them over the phone. And so I've sort of been able to sort of keep more of a contact and a better relationship with a lot more patients, because I can do my face-to-face consults, and at the end of the session I can then get onto my phone consults and continue on with that care.
As we sort of wrap up, I was also reading a few years ago, and I was lucky enough to go to this event, was the Commonwealth Games on the Gold Coast. I believe that you were part of the Queen's Baton Relay as part of that, and a few other clubs in cricket that you've played for. You've played against the men for Queenscliff. You've also represented Brighton District and also Monash University. You able to just give us a quick summation on your experiences just quickly on those clubs and the honour to take the baton for the Queen's Baton Relay in the lead up to the Com Game?
Well, Queen's Baton Relay was a real honour. It was a total buzz of the day. It was just great to meet the other people who were selected as part of that group. And I actually still keep in contact with several people that I actually was involved with at that time. And yeah, that was a bit of a pool of a variety of different reasons for getting awarded the honour to run in there. Yeah, look, that was just a real achievement. And it was actually funny that I had a friend that I used to play rugby with from my old rugby team back in Melbourne. That's another sport that's on the TV. She happened to be down in Queenscliff during the week, couple of days off, went down just and go, oh, relay's on, sort of, and went down and then sort of said, and former rugby union player Victoria, I go, oh, I better have a look. Hang on, I know her. So that was a bit of a laugh. And it just shows that we've got a small world. And yeah, I've been actively helping one of the doyens of the Point Lonsdale Tennis Club go through who had been nominated, and so trying to help her do all the nomination stuff online and getting photos and things like that for her nomination, then turned around and got done snuck behind my back myself. So that was a bit of a laugh. And in terms of my cricketing background, I was always in the backyard, smashing car headlight covers with straight drive, watching out. Your cricket is very developed by your backyard. So I was always out there as a kid, always wanted to, but I grew up on South Gippsland and there was no cricket available. Went down to Melbourne to go to university, and so I went and naturally joined the local cricket club there at Monash and had a wonderful time over a number of years. Unfortunately, good things come to an end, and where I was in terms of my cricket and my development, it probably was a little bit stale, and people had sort of moved on from me. And I was also working as a doctor, so it made it a lot harder for availability. Opportunity came to cross over to Brighton, where I had a number of friends, which I'd sort of often from playing football, guilded with them. And so I went there, and that was sort of in some ways a new start, and was able to reset myself and to develop my game and become a little bit more reliable as a player. When we moved down to Point Lonsdale, it's a long way to go to Brighton to play cricket, and so I finished off the season, but it was a bit much, and so I gave it away. Watching the Ashes back, in England, I think it was the 2015-2016 season, it's like, oh, geez, wouldn't it be good to play again? And then as it was, they were sort of reinvigorating the D grade at Queenscliff. I thought, oh yeah, I'll go down and have a game, and that was a lot of fun. In some ways, it sort of set me up and developed my batting, because suddenly I'm dealing, playing against men for the first time, and that certainly helps you with your technique and learning and all the other banter that goes on the field. Like, it'd be really funny because, like, when you go out to bat, I'd have my helmet on, and I look pretty lean, and they'd all think I was a teenage boy. And like, there was one umpire goes, oh yeah, I've umpired before you before. And I go, no, you haven't. No, I'm sure I've umpired you before. No, not in this comp. And one of my teammates,
babyface Jackie, eh?
Yeah, and one of my teammates was giggling at one stage when I went out to bat. Like, I went out to open, and he's sort of commenting about all the, just the banter around the ground, just everything else, and just trying to talk and put me off my game and everything else. And then after about 5 overs, they realised I was female, and he said, just shut up. So again, there's been some very interesting experiences with that. Having come over to Ocean Grove to play with the women's team, there has been an occasion where, when on the Thursday night, they are looking for players, and so I said, any of you girls available? And so I've put my hand up and played a handful of games in D grade. It's sort of some interesting experiences. I sort of got my top score of 15 in D grade and a couple of wickets for one game this season. So it's sort of, I think that the guys players are happy to invite us to come over to play because we sort of change the routine a little bit. And, our bowling's a little bit different, our batting's a little bit different. So we mix it up, which adds a bit of variety. And, it's been a really good experience. I've sort of, that journey of clubs. And even if Queen's Click were to look at a women's team or things like that, I'd be saying, no, thank you very much. But I'm, sort of an Ocean Grove cricketer now. And that's how I can see myself staying for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, well, you've had a wonderful season, Jackie. Just looking at your stats, you've had 11 innings and very consistent with the bat, 274 runs. The leading run score for Ocean Grove at an average of 54.8. How about that? Your highest score is 46, but your average is better. So it's got to be a few of those not outs. But you've had some, some really good contributors. Your partner, Michelle Cameron, who incidentally used to be my school teacher, was a bit of a pillar of success for the last 2 seasons. Danielle, Vigilante, and Tazana obviously came down from Bendigo this year. Names obviously Andrea, and can't forget Tanya and Bernie, Bernadette Giblin, and really community people. And it just shows that cricket for women in the community, there's definitely a place for it. So we wanted to thank you for coming on the Stoned Heen View. I know you told me that the average age is 43 of the women's team, but you're episode 49. So if you lift your age a couple of dots next year, you can still go out and win the flag. So thanks for joining us on the Stoned Heen View, Jackie.
No worries. Thanks for having me on there.
Well, that has been the Stoned Heen View. You can get in contact with us, and thanks to Jackie. She has been our guest today, as in Jacquie Johnston, the Ocean Grove Senior Women's Cricket Club skipper, and it's been fantastic to have her on the program. You can get in contact with us on Stoned Heen View with our new banner. Obviously, Jared Whitcomb from Whitsell Media has organised this banner, and he's done a wonderful job. You can type us into Facebook, Instagram. We'll be going up on Apple Podcasts, also Spotify, and our launching platform, which is Podbean. Our Stoned Heen View has also a YouTube channel, and our account is on Twitter at Stoned Heen View. So until next time, this has been the Stoned Heen View episode 49 podcast. Until next time, we will see you soon for episode 50. What a landmark figure on the Stoned Heen View podcast. I'm Mark Heenan. I'm signing off. We'll see you soon. Bye.